Attachment theory is the closest that science has come to explaining how relationships work, what makes them successful and what makes them not successful.
Today I'm joined by the wise and wonderful Julie Menanno, licensed marriage and family therapist, author of Secure Love, and mother of 6.
My job is to come in and give people awareness and help them have the words, figuring out how am I going to use this thing called attachment theory to have a better relationship with my own emotions and a better relationship with my partner's emotions. Underneath the surface, we're all needing to be heard, to be understood, to know that our partner will be there for us when we need them. We need to be healthy about the way we're expressing our needs around this and listening to the other person's needs. If we don't have those things, you just can't actually feel safe and close with another person. The more bonded a couple is together, the more harmony in the home. There's all sorts of positive results on parenting.
What's one thing you wish more couples talked about?
Honestly, I would say put energy into protecting that. Put energy into nurturing that. It will pay off in dividends.
Welcome to Do Not Disturb, the Inside Story. I'm your host, Simona Devta. Coffee date or movie night?
Coffee date. I like to talk.
Yeah, we cannot talk at the movie night. That's right. Most underrated relationships ritual.
Oh, coffee talk. Probably. Honestly, true. Yeah.
What's one thing you wish more couples talked about?
Emotional connection and how to get good at that. And I'm not talking about that exclusively, but I think that is a conversation that's super important. Just like you would talk about money or sex or parenting. I think that piece is really important to address.
I think we don't talk about all the topics you just mentioned.
Yeah. Well, it's
enough, but
down. The other one's
definitely
easier.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Amazing. So welcome to Do Not Disturb. I feel like we've warmed up. For those who don't know you, could you just tell us who is Julie and how did you get started in the career that you are now?
Okay, great. I'm Julie Menanno. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as an author and podcaster and social media personality. And I consider myself an expert in applied attachment theory. So applying attachment theory to couples work. I consider myself, my first hat, other than my, personal life, my first professional hat is couples therapist. That's what I spend the majority of my time doing, which is where I learn everything I know. And so what happened is during COVID, I decided to help people learn more about attachment theory in their relationship, less about describing it. I think a lot of people were describing it and more about what to do with it to help your relationship. And so I started a social media account that turned into something, kind of big and interesting. And then from there, I was asked to write a book. And so now I have a book out called Secure Love, which basically walks couples through the self-help version of the work that I do with the couples in my practice. Very structured type of therapy. And then from that, I decided to create a podcast where I work with a real couple for 20 sessions, doing the process of the book and the work I do with my couples. So it's basically like, okay, the book is to help people use the information or the process that I use in my practice. And then the podcast is to help bring that process to life with a real couple. And
that's very helpful. Yeah, because books are great and I read a lot of self-help books, but sometimes there is a little gap between bringing it into real life. Like you want those examples. You will see the way I ask the questions today. I will be like, give me an example. How does that look like? Yeah. So I'm sure your book is full of examples, but sometimes hearing real people talk it through helps a lot. So you're very shy. You didn't say any numbers, but you have over 1.3 million followers just on your Instagram. And I'm sure the reach and the numbers are way higher. And the first question I wanted to ask you, why do you think it resonates so deeply with so many, that attachment, and emotional safety of relationships?
Well, because I mean, it's the way that we're all operating ultimately, especially the closer the relationship, the more you are operating on the foundation of either emotional safety or lack of. And so it's just universally applied. I mean, sure, there are some cultural differences as far as the way that the kind of surface level ways that these emotional needs get met, because people make in cultures make different meanings of different types of behaviors and arrangements. But ultimately, underneath the surface, we're all needing to be heard, to be understood, to know that our partner will be there for us when we need them, however we define that being there for us, to know that we're going to be emotionally validated, that our needs matter to them. We all need those things. And if we don't have those things, you just can't actually feel safe and close with another person. I mean, you can even apply this to a relationship at work where, or even just the two of us talking right here and now. Like, we do need to feel that we're going to hear each other and that we're going to make an effort to understand each other. And that is going to help our conversation go more smoothly, right? And in this situation, it's easy because we both have very defined roles, and, we don't have an impact over each other's lives, so it makes it safer. But once you bring people together, in a relationship where they're relying on each other for emotional needs to be met and attachment needs to be met, and living a life together and making a lot of decisions together, about where our lives overlap, our finances, our parenting, our careers, our, family plans, just all of those
What
layers
we eat.
decisions, what
Yeah.
we eat. Yes, yes, where we go to dinner even. And so anyway, the idea is like, look, whether you have words for it or have awareness of it or not, you have emotional needs from your partner. It doesn't matter how logical you think you are. So my job is to come in and give people awareness and help them have the words and figuring out, like, okay, how am I going to use this thing called attachment theory to as a template to have a better relationship with my own emotions and a better relationship with my partner's emotions and vice versa. And so I think it just first of all, attachment theory resonates, and second of all I do all day every day is help people get better by using it. So just putting it out there to the world. And I would like to believe a way that helps them use this theory to actually get better instead of just using it to understand what's wrong is maybe something
And
new
can
I have to bring.
can you tell us what the theory is?
Yes, the theory is basically that we all have emotional needs in relationships to feel safe with another person, meaning that we can have a conversation. I'm not going to walk away feeling devalued or misunderstood or invalidated, and close to another person, meaning that I'm going to not only not have those bad things happen, but I'm going to actively walk away feeling heard and validated and filled up and connected. So we can feel safe with someone and not close to them, but we have to feel safe with them to feel close to them, if that makes sense. And so
Yeah.
the idea is that if that's not happening in interactions between partners, if they're having these like repeated interactions where they're not feeling the good stuff and actively feeling bad stuff, that's going to create emotional distress, right? And then how you respond to that emotional distress is going to define your attachment style. So if you respond to that emotional distress with kind of like a fight approach, a protest approach, listen to me, a desperation, a trying everything you can to close the distance, you're going to qualify as having an anxious attachment because you're anxiously trying, yeah, you're anxiously
Mhm.
trying to get it back, right? To get your needs met. If you respond to your emotional distress by just avoiding it, shutting it off, pretending it doesn't exist, going into your head, you have an avoidant attachment. You're just trying to like, let's just make it go away. And what happens is we typically respond to others' emotions in the same way that we do our own. And so not only in a distressed relationship are you not able to understand and help your own emotions, you're also not able to understand and help your partner's emotions and vice versa. And then things get really wonky and we get stuck in these negative communication cycles, and those can make things really a lot worse. And then what happens is if couples don't know how to escape those cycles of like protest, shut down, or protest defense, then they get stuck in them. And if they don't know how to repair them, then you have all this kind of resentment and fear and all these things building up in the relationship. And then it can really, I always like to say couples don't take each other down, negative cycles take couples down.
That's a nice way of putting it. You kind of set the tone for the rest of the podcast because I've prepared questions around each of those like little phrases. You said like resentment. I have questions on that, and
Yep.
yeah, and we didn't even touch on the kids coming into, and not just children. Actually, there are always third parties affecting relationship,
Always.
right?
Yes.
Work decision,
Laws.
things like
Yes.
that. So that's just two people interacting, but then there are also third parties. So I have a lot of questions on all of
Okay.
what
I can't wait.
you just said. But I think before we dive into that, so the attachment theory is like a blueprint you said for your work with the couples, and
Yeah.
then you took your work and you translated it into a book, Secure
Yes.
Love. Can you tell us like how that process also went and like what we can find in the book, and like you said that there are some frameworks to work with the issues that we just talked about through the way we deal in a conflict with a partner. So I'm interested to kind of dive into your head and be like, how did you go through this is my work and how I can make an output into the book?
Okay, sure. So basically, I'm going in order. If you try to go too fast, too soon with a couple, like a lot of couples therapy, they'll try to get you to a point of communication early on that your relationship isn't ready for. So, and then it goes south, and then it can actually make things worse. So this is a very organized process. It's actually called emotion focused therapy for couples. It has, a name. It's something that I've learned, and there are many therapists out there who practice it. And so what I start with, not necessarily what everyone starts with, but what I start is grounding us in attachment theory, right? What is this? What does it mean? Why is it important? How does it explain? Because I do believe that attachment theory is the closest that science has come to explaining how relationships work as far as what makes them successful and what makes them not successful. So I'm going to ground the reader in that, ground the reader in the 4 different types of attachment styles. And then I'm going to teach how these insecure attachment styles create negative cycles between two partners, right? How this causes partners to use words and behaviors that end up making things worse. And each partner is contributing. Maybe some partners are behaving worse than others, but everybody's contributing as far as how they're communicating to these cycles. And then I'm going to go from there and say, okay, now we know, here's me helping you kind of map out your cycle and understanding a little bit more about what happens in you and what happens in your partner on a deeper level when you're stuck in this place. And then I'm going to teach you how to interrupt them when they're happening. And then I'm going to teach you how to prevent them from happening, how to create an environment where we don't, go there to begin with. And then we're going to talk about, how to heal wounds, because a lot of times there's big attachment injuries that couples, a lot of them, it could be an affair. A lot of injuries I have found are around hospital events, like health events that one partner, didn't feel their partner showed up for them around having a birth or a surgery or some kind of maybe even a chronic illness. That's a big one. But it could be anything. It could be attachment injuries around substance abuse or around step family issues. It's anything that just like completely shook the trust of the relationship to a degree that it has to be addressed before we're going to heal. And the problem with it is that if couples are trying to address these injuries in their negative cycles, they'll just make the injuries worse. So at the beginning of the book, we got to get those stabilized, right? And then we go into healing these injuries. And then, beyond that, it's just a matter of like extenuating circumstances like emotional or mental illness, like depression or anxiety, how does this impact it? How does trauma impact these cycles? How might personality disorders impact this? I have a chapter on sex. And then, yeah, I can't like, how does the book end? I don't know. I can't remember the
Find
last.
out. Buy a book and find out,
No,
guys.
no, no, no. The best chapter of all is I go through like, I don't know, dozens of different situations that couples fight about that are common, right? Like you want your partner to help around the house more, you want your partner to go to therapy with you, whatever. And I say, instead of leading with this when this problem's happening, try these approaches. And then I frame these phrases as, ways that are more like inviting your partner in to hearing you and helping you instead of, pushing them away with what you're trying to say.
And is that with words or like frameworks with words, or sometimes it's unspoken actions that help us meet?
I use words, but that there's definitely, I 100% agree that couples are very nonverbal, right? There's a lot going on nonverbally. I mean, eye contact or facial expression or touch, affectionate touch, sexual touch. There's a lot of emotional energy being, communicated. But I do need for couples to have words for what's happening nonverbally. Because if they don't understand what that means when I see your face kind of do this thing, right? Then they don't, it's almost like the doing it is one thing, but understanding why it matters does need the words. So the words are not to take away from the nonverbals. They're to enhance the meaning of the nonverbals.
Explain. Yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Great. That was a very wonderful answer explaining all. I have a lot of questions again about each of those chapters, but I think within the questions that I prepared, we will unfold. So I touched very briefly on the baby and or third parties. So you've said somewhere that after kids, relationship often shifts in unspoken ways, which makes total sense. It definitely happened to every single guest who came on the podcast so far. What are some common changes that couples don't always expect according to your, practice and what you come across as a specialist?
Yeah. So one thing that's going to happen is you're going to add more stress. I mean, you're going to add more, expectations around each partner's roles and responsibilities in raising a family together. The dynamics going to be shifted. And so if there are any kind of lingering problems between the couple before the baby's born, and when I say lingering, I mean things that are kind of under the surface, how they're communicating about any kind of conflict or stress in the relationship. It's probably going to get worse when the baby's born because the baby is going to only, and this isn't always, right? I don't want to scare people, but the baby is going to create some conflict, right? We all have to figure out a way to navigate new things in life, right? And that doesn't mean it's bad. It's just, hey, we do maybe have different needs around who's going to do this role or who's going to do that role. And we might not completely see eye to eye. We might not completely see eye to eye about how we feed the baby or how we help the baby learn to sleep or don't learn to sleep, right? And so if the couple hasn't learned to navigate conflict before the baby, then we can only assume that is, the baby's going to bring more reasons to have to navigate conflict. So that's probably the biggest issue is that, anything that is going to come into a couple's life and shift the dynamic in a way that's unfamiliar and create more opportunities for having to work through problems and more stress because now babies bring anxiety, right? I mean, we have to, especially a new baby that, you haven't had a child before. So if the couple really needs to have strong skills to work through the issues that the baby is going to bring to the table, and if they don't, one of two things is going to happen. They're either going to learn because the baby's going to present them with great opportunities to work through problems together, or they're going to get trapped in these negative cycles, and that can end up, harming the relationship. And to varying degrees, and sometimes it takes a couple, months to a couple years to kind of find their balance with each other. But it doesn't mean it's hopeless if they don't right from the beginning.
A word that I haven't used myself, but once I heard it on this podcast from the guest, I thought, yeah, there was this when I had my child. You
Mhm.
know, I just never maybe like verbalized it. But a word some women used, resentment. Resentment, against their partner when having a
Sure.
child, either like you said, because of the way they showed up or didn't show up at birth, or like those first months, or
Mhm.
they just didn't feel, like they have been seen it, because women go through so much, obviously, as pregnancy and birth and those first months. And they said there was like a real sense of resentment towards
Mhm.
my man. And I was wondering if that's something you came across, in the couple's work, and how do you advise for women to deal with that?
Yeah, well, first of all, all couples are going to have reasons to resent each other. That's just kind of part of relationships where the dependency is high, the emotional dependency and also the dependency to just do life together. So resentment isn't uncommon at all. I'm not saying every couple does, but bringing a baby into it is going to create more opportunity for resentment because now we have more emotional expectations, we have more attachment expectations. The woman is typically even more dependent because physically we become very dependent when we're having a baby. And so the resentment isn't the problem, it's how we're dealing with the resentment. So, two things. One, we need to address the issue that's creating the resentment. We need to figure out what's the behavior here that's happening. And that might be behaviors on both sides, right? It might be we're not communicating clearly enough, and that's creating some wonky expectations. Maybe our expectations are inappropriate. Maybe we're trying to get our partner to help and they're genuinely not stepping up and helping in the right way. I would need to work with someone to kind of figure out like what is the root of this resentment? What's going on behaviorally? We need to get that stabilized, first of all, right? But then the second thing is we need to make space for the conversation around the resentment. So, what that looks like is one partner saying, like, look, I know this maybe wasn't intentional on your part, but, this happened in the hospital and I can see it in all these different ways. But there is a part of me that, kind of resents the way you showed up. And, maybe that has been sort of a pattern in our relationship. And I am carrying some resentment around that. Okay. So that's a healthy expression of the resentment. And then the other partner's role in that is to sit with that and lean into it. Okay. I hear you. I hear what you're saying. I know that was really hard for you. I apologize for my role in that. And I'm willing to look at my part in this and see if we can figure out a way to do things in a way that doesn't, build up resentment between the two of us. And then,
And
but
right.
that partner might have some resentment too. And at some point, their resentment needs to be expressed and held by the first partner, but not in the same conversation.
This example is perfect. Like I am going to say to my partner, I don't know, I'm not happy that we have two dogs at the moment, that he's not picking up, I don't know, the poop of
Okay.
the dogs. And so is me, right? He can completely dismiss that and be like, it's not true, right? That also happens in
Yeah.
relationships. But then he can actually start doing, like, and I find, at least in my relationship dynamic, like, verbally I
Mhm.
am not always acknowledged, but like in 2 days, do
Yeah.
you think that that happens as well? I mean, what you describe is
Mhm.
perfect. Sometimes this happens too,
Yeah.
where everyone is mature enough and stable enough and not acting from
Mhm.
role.
Well, I think
And
if you,
yeah,
if the behavior is shifting, that's great, right? And but w- where I would see a problem with that approach is
yeah,
when the behavior isn't shifting because you guys have a conflict, you see it differently. So if we're not adding that, first of all, what happens when your partner's going, well, look, I never really agreed to clean up after the dog, or who knows, like, how are you guys going to do that? Right. So if you can figure out a way to do it, that's great. There's no problem. But if you're going into negative cycles about around stuff that you really, the behavior isn't shifting, then I would need for
mm,
you guys to figure out a way to meet each other. And then it isn't a problem if you're not carrying lingering resentment because you're going, oh, well, I said it. Maybe they didn't respond in the right, right then and there. But look, they're meeting my need. They're responding to me. They're starting to clean up his stuff, right? Great, perfect, no problem. But if you're sitting there with kind of some festering resentments and that's not getting talked about, then we need to figure out how to talk about it and heal it.
That builds up then.
Exactly.
Great. How, other than talking, how can partners show up better for each
Mhm.
other in general in those high stress situations, dogs, jobs,
Mhm.
in-laws, and whatever life throws at you? What are the small, usually they're small things, I guess. What are those moments of
Mhm.
showing up that partners can do?
Well, behavior is one way, right? I mean, we need to, you know, the way of your what you're describing with your husband is he cleans up the dog's mess. So that's a behavior that maybe you're not, overtly saying, "Hey, can you go clean up after the dog?" "Yes, I will," but he does it, right? And so when you see him do it, your nervous system settles. Or he might not have to say, "Look, I cleaned up the dog," but you just know it's happening. We can do sometimes, if we're in a situation with in-laws, right? And one partner is feeling kind of, I don't know, like ignored or, whatever, like the sister-in-law is saying something rude and you don't necessarily want to argue with her and it's not the right moment to, talk about it. What partner can just like rub your back or something nonverbal that's, physically soothing, that could be a way. Eye contact or some sort of facial expression, softening, anything that is signaling to safety to the nervous system. It does not have to be through words. It can be through actions and nonverbal communication and also physical and sexual touch. I mean, many couples, we don't want sexual connection to be the only way that they emotionally connect, but sex is a way to emotionally connect. It's basically sending messages, I care about you, I care about your needs, I'm attracted to you, you're special to me, sending all sorts of good messages that don't require words, but that doesn't take away from the fact that we also need to use words to emotionally connect.
Everything is important. Actually, sex is
Mhm.
something I am wanted to touch on because when I said to some moms in my group that I am having you on the podcast, they said, "Well, can you ask her what do you do when you have your kids for a while and you're good partners to each other and everything is going smoothly. You're probably like friends, but you're more in a roommate mode. You're co-sharing life rather than you are those romantic partners as well. And how do you course correct from that?
Mhm. Well, I mean, I think with intentionality, it's like you have to really step back and go, what is the benefit of us bringing our sex like life more to life? And what's the downside of not doing so? Well, the benefit is a greater bond. The benefit is, how that bond also impacts your children. Like the more bonded a couple is together, the more, harmony in the home. I mean, there's all sorts of positive results on parenting. So we have to kind of step away from, are we making time for this? Not just as a way to feel fulfilled as humans and feel fulfilled as a couple, but also to be better parents to our children. So it does require, intentionality. I think that requires that both partners have awareness of what helps them feel sexually aroused, what helps them feel sexually connected, and they're able to kind of nurture that part of the relationship with intentionality because it can be very easy to kind of fall into a rut, right? Where we get stuck in a pattern. I would also want to look at like what are the blocks to the couple having
Yeah,
more.
a lot of women feel they will be rejected.
Oh, why?
So they don't want to damage like the good thing going there because he's a good team member,
Mhm.
can you call it a team member? But you're a good team, you're good at parenting,
Okay.
you are always there at your concerts or whatever, football matches. Like you have a great thing going on there, but then
Okay.
if sex doesn't work, then all of a sudden you drop this ball that you have to deal with, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't there anymore before.
I mean, there's so many reasons that I would need to know what does that mean rejection? Like, first of all, what are you afraid you'll be rejected for? Like, you'll be rejected because you're not doing a good enough job at sex, or you'll be rejected because now your partner sees you as this mother role and they won't want you in that sexual role. I mean, there's so many different reasons that fear could be there that involve one person's stuff or the other person's stuff. So I would just need to know, like, get more clear about what that's going to look like to figure out like how you, because ultimately what we want is the person not feeling rejected. So I need to know what are the blocks to acceptance around sex, and I my perspective is that it's usually the man who, in a hetero relationship, the man who is wanting the sexual aliveness to be maintained and getting the rejection when there's a baby that comes to the table.
Well, that's baby. Yeah, I think the moms
Okay.
I was relating, that's kind of later when the kids are at later stages. When there is a baby, a lot of women also on this podcast, they came and they were like, "What is this 6 weeks?" Like in the
Yeah.
UK, we have a NHS guideline that after 6 weeks, you're safe to have sex.
Same.
Most women don't feel like that. So they feel this immense pressure on having sex with the partner when their body is
Yes.
nowhere, near. You're a mother of six, so you went
Yeah.
through this many times. But yeah, is it actually that was not
Um,
my original question, but do we have a conversation about that? Do
yeah,
we
for
find
sure.
another way to have sex? I mean, there are many ways.
I would do whatever you can do to protect your sexual relationship. I think that I have witnessed in my personal life with friends and myself and in my professional life that the couples who actively try to move past these blocks, whatever they are, they're real. And maybe you don't move past them in 6 weeks. Maybe you move past them in a year. Then they're doing better because they're maintaining. It's almost like, well, couples who don't ever talk to each other outside of having kids together, like outside of that topic, they're going to struggle because they're not bonding. It's just this powerful bonding opportunity. So I would say put energy into protecting that, put energy into nurturing that. It will pay off in dividends. With that said, you know, personally, when I had my first child, like 6 weeks was fine. I was perfectly fine with 6 weeks. I didn't, one child isn't, I found one child to be stressful because I didn't know what I was doing. But by the time I had twins, when those were numbers 4 and 5, and I had 6 children, I'm sorry, I had 5 children age 6 and under. I mean, it was a good year before. I mean, my body was being just consumed by children. I mean, breastfeeding twins and the others needing. So that wasn't really possible for me to show up physically. But I think because my husband and I were able to communicate through that. And I think it was pretty obvious to him, like, okay, this is going to take a bit, but I always big picture prioritized and put a high priority and still do on that part of our lives together because I believe that it impacts us positively just everywhere. We're
Well,
doing
you
better
you are a
for
superwoman.
no,
5 under 6 is
I am not
phenomenal. Yeah.
I'm not a superwoman. Just please trust me on that. And the time that you put into that does, come out of other areas of life. To me, it's worth the cost. But definitely, that is one area where we have done very well. Is we
Well,
pray.
and that fuels, I think that fuels the rest of the parts as well, like you said. Like
I really
it's
do
an
too.
important part. It's an important part to feel connected.
Quick pause. If you're enjoying this episode, take a second to follow or subscribe wherever you are listening. It really helps us grow the show and bring on the guests that matter. Now, back to it.
If you could put, I don't know if that's professionally allowed, but if you could put a number on how important sex life is in the
Mhm.
relationship, like proportionately, what would the number be?
Um,
Somebody said 100, and the husband was like, "What am I to you?" Just
oh,
just
wait. What do you
yeah,
mean? What
but
do you
I
mean?
out
What's
like
the
we have,
scale?
yeah, 100 or 10, whatever is easier for you.
And like 100 is the best sex ever. And
No, like not the sex needs to be best ever, but importance of good sex life within your marriage? Like, everything is important. You want your to be, yeah, like within the whole pool of relationship. Yeah.
Well, I mean, honestly, I would say probably I'm going to give a high number just because I've just experienced over and over and over the couples with the more active sex lives seem to be doing better, maybe 30%. I mean, yeah.
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 Well, that is
I
very
mean,
close to my
you
numbers.
can't be having sex all day long every day. Nobody wants to do that anyway. But I mean, I would say like you want, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, it's not about amount of times you do it. I
Right.
think about feeling good that that thing is going well for you in your life.
I
Like
think
everyone is happy in.
okay, let me say
Yeah.
this. I think 100% of the time, it's a good idea for both partners to feel that reasonably, if I reach to my partner for sexual connection, they're going to be there for me. They're going to be available to me. Maybe not right then, maybe not that night, but in general, in the big picture, my partner is willing to show up and meet my sexual needs. I'm willing to show up and meet their sexual needs, and that we're going to make that happen. Maybe again, maybe not tonight. Maybe I am not feeling good for a week or maybe, whatever, but we're going to be there for each other. And I think when partners know that, they're going to be fine. And when we don't know that, we start to feel insecure, right? If one partner doesn't know that, they're going to start to feel insecure. And now that insecurity is going to start being acted out in other parts of the relationship.
That's very true. I had another question, which is not about sex, but you said, good sex life then makes you also better parents because you're like more joined. And you also talked somewhere, I think it was on Instagram where I've seen that about, having anxious avoidance styles, which sometimes anxious is more a female trait and avoidant is more male trait, also play out outside the relationship and then spill into the parenting. So there will be a lot of dynamics within couple that spill into parenting. And I wanted to unfold a little bit those, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, anywhere in the relationship that you're not that the couple is communicating in a way that is leaving them feeling, these unmet attachment needs, like I'm not feeling heard, I'm not feeling emotionally validated, I'm not knowing that my needs are mattering to you. Yes, we're talking about, are we going to feed the kids, processed chicken or not? Like we're at the market, we're talking about this bag of, that chicken that you buy that's already cut up and cooked. And, I'm saying this because I had a couple who got into a huge fight over this. It was like one partner was like, it's protein, it's chicken, it's good for them. It's better than giving them, a cupcake. And the other partner was like, no, I absolutely don't want our kids eating this kind of processed meat. Like we need to cook the chicken breast and cut it up for them. That's what's healthier for them. I mean, both have really good points, right? There's no real right or wrong to that. And so what happens is the way they're communicating about that chicken is leaving both of them feeling unheard, misunderstood, like our needs matter. They're arguing instead of leaning in and going, okay, help me understand what's important about this to you. All right, I'm willing to hear you, and finding some sort of, solution based on meeting each other emotionally instead of pushing each other away. So now they go home and they have to parent their children, right? And they've had this bad energy around the chicken. Yeah. And now the bad energy is going to come out in their ability to collaborate with the kids, or maybe they're even going to act emotional stuff out on the kids. The dad's going to be kind of snappy because he's feeling yucky, or the mom's going to be kind of snappy. And then the mom's going to see the dad being snappy, and now she's going to get snappy with the dad for snapping at the kids. You can just see how becomes like a snowball effect. So now apply that to anything in life,
So let's step back. We are in the supermarket. We are that couple.
Yes.
So in that case, should the mom go like, "Oh, I hear you. It's a protein. Why don't we buy that? But we'll like bake our own sweet potatoes." Kind of like what's the dialogue, the perfect dialogue that would have to happen in that shop in that moment?
I can't say what their decision will be because there could be a million different ways that a couple navigates that, right? But what I would say is, first of all, we need to be healthy about the way we're expressing our needs around this and listening to the other person's needs. So it's going to require, all right, help me understand, what does this mean to you? All right. So, and it might not be this overt, but like clearly you have some fears around processed chicken, right? Help me understand that. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm afraid that if our kids have a bunch of, chemicals, then that's going to affect their immune system and, they're not going to feel good in the world. And I love our kids and I want them to thrive. And then the other one's like, okay, I hear you. Here's where I'm coming from. There's a lot on our plate and I understand, doing the best we can for them. But for me, it seems like if we can find some ways to make health a little bit easier, then overall in the big picture, we'll achieve that goal if we can be a little more flexible. And that's where I'm coming from. I've got all this stuff I got to do and my stress levels get kind of high and they're able to just like hear each other out. And what I have found over and over and over again is when couples can communicate from that place from the get-go, the symptoms start to just decrease on their own, right? All of a sudden, the chicken isn't that important because now we're getting this feeling of being heard and understood, and it just feels so good. And both partners are willing to be a little bit more flexible. And especially in situations with chicken. Now, there are situations that the stakes are higher, like where are we going to send our kids to school or, whatever. But I find that most partners, most topics aren't huge deal breakers. And a lot of times if they are a deal breaker, it's because they're doubling down because of some of the emotional stuff going on underneath the surface. And worst case scenario, the chicken is what takes this couple down, right? The chicken is it. It's the hill that they're both going to die on. I absolutely cannot feed my kids processed chicken. I absolutely cannot, do my end of it. And then they have to split up because of that. Highly unlikely that's going to happen. And most likely they're going to flex with each other there. And then when one person flexes in one area, it's more likely that the other person is going to flex in another area because they're going to kind of find a way to, be flexible with each other. If it's always one person getting their way, no matter how well they talk about things, I mean, that's going to be a problem. So it really begins with how are we just going into this situation, hearing each other and understanding each other without saying you're stupid, you're silly, you're lazy, you don't care about our kids' health, things like that.
Yeah, definitely not dismissing other people's feelings is not going to be helpful to create secure attachments.
No.
Are there any myths about like needing something from your partner? Like, would you say some things that like I can tell you where I'm coming from this because I talked to a lot of people before having you here, and then some problems that friends of mine experience. I feel like the expectation of the partner today is so high. Like you need to earn, you need to look like Brad Pitt, you need to be amazing caring father, like amazing sex, like we need to have movie night and we need to have a date and we need to find one-on-one, like it's just a lot of what we expect from the partner. I'm like, do you think, and same men expect from women, to look a certain way, etc. So are there any like common myth that we came across or something you wish people didn't carry on their shoulders coming into relationships?
Yeah, I think one of the things is if partners aren't able, if each person in the relationship, each partner isn't able to kind of help their self with their own emotions, then they're going to be acting out that lack of ability to manage their own self in the relationship. And that is going to create either a lot too high expectations or too low expectations, right? Either way, it's out of balance. And so I think sometimes couples are trying to get their needs met with each other that are really self needs. For example, wanting your partner to look like Brad Pitt, right? If that is, that's a real thing, not necessarily Brad Pitt, but some partners might have really perfectionistic standards around appearance, right? And so some of that there's truth to. It's like, yeah, we all want to be our best and look attractive, have our partners be attracted to us. But is this crossing a line where appearance is just maybe a little too important because there's some unmet needs around that with that person that they're acting out in a perfectionistic standards around appearance, right? We might see this more with probably men and women than, and what is going on with that, right? There's a good chance that if there's an over reliance on appearance, then there's something missing emotionally in that person. They're trying to meet some emotional need within themselves that's not getting met, worried about being rejected if my life doesn't look good enough on the surface. I don't know what it is. It could be a number of things. And that person needs to learn how to kind of deal with their fear of rejection instead of demanding that their partner always look perfect for them, right? So to circle back, the need for your partner to look perfect is inappropriate. The need for your partner to be attractive enough for you is appropriate. And on top of that, the need to deal with your own feelings of fear of rejection, which is creating these perfectionistic standards, is not the relationship need. That's self-need. So
distinguishing between your own needs and relationship
yes,
needs.
Much better, much quicker way to say that. Yes.
Yeah, I just like to summarize because I feel like all these topics that we navigate are so messy, so we almost want to. I'm looking forward to reading your book. I haven't read it, but it's nice to have a framework where you really, unpack things and put them in really manageable chunks, because somehow we manage so much nowadays and everything seems a little bit more complex than
I
it's.
I'll say this too. I think and I don't address this in the book at all, and I haven't really addressed this anywhere, but I think there's something to be said about this like masculine, feminine energy thing. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with that topic, but that's kind of, a lot of people are talking about that right now. And of course, we have, not just the traditional hetero version of that. Usually in all relationships, regardless of sexual orientation or gender or whatever, you're going to have someone who's needing to express their masculine energy more and someone who's needing to express their feminine energy more. And I do think there's something to be said about finding that a balance between partners that is maybe
where they feel they can express that energy. That's what you
yes.
mean. Yeah. Where definitely. And those boundaries are also blurred nowadays, and
Very much so. And I think is
yeah.
creating a little more of a problem than maybe people realize.
Yeah. I am almost like, as a millennial growing up, I've been rejecting my femininity in a lot of it, and I'm regaining that now. And I'm actually, I like being feminine, and I'm like, it's not a bad thing. I think I grew up with a lot of thinking like it makes me weaker or worse employee, or less on. So I've been rejecting a lot of it. Like I've been like,
needs will get bulldozed if
yeah. So I'm like, yeah, shopping is good,
Yeah. It is good.
It is good. You're a mother of 6 and a career woman. How do you advise to moms not to be lost in the motherhood and to regain themselves? Not necessarily to find career, but just to find themselves again.
I think, well, I mean, for 10 years, I was a stay-at-home mom. So I definitely had that part of my life. And I think what helped me the most, obviously I didn't have, at that time, I didn't have a lot of help, with my kids. So for their needs to be met, I did really have to lean heavily, heavily, heavily into that motherhood role. But I always maintained just something for myself, right? Like for a while, I was, a runner. And that's what I did on my own, is I would, did a lot of running. And I'm trying to think, there were like other things along the way. At some point, I went back to grad school and started, building this career I have. And that was always my thing. So I do think it's important to have a self outside of mothering, for sure. I think it can get out of balance if someone has too much self and they're not, taking care of their kids in that way enough, then obviously that's an imbalance. And I do think there's something to be said too for seasons. Like some seasons when you have a newborn, you might just not have any time for yourself because you're literally responsible for keeping this newborn alive, right? So that goes on for a few weeks. And sometimes we just need to accept, like, look, this is life right now. But, once I kind of get out of this intensity, then I do need to start, figuring out ways to have a self. And to be honest with you, I mean, I do have some guilt around what it took for me to go to grad school and start learning. Part of that motivation was to be a better mom because I really wanted to learn, like, what's going on with this psychology thing, because the books aren't getting me there. The parenting books aren't fully getting me there. But I do carry a lot of guilt, like, because I did, it did require me to be away from my family more, and I had to hire more help and things like that. But my girls now, because I have 5 daughters, and they're all teenagers at this point, and all of them say, Mom, it was hard for us to not have as much of you, when you were in school. However, we're so proud of you. Like, you're such an inspiration because of, what you've been able to accomplish. So I don't know. There's never a real right or wrong answer, but I do think that it is important to always maintain a sense of identity outside of being a mom. I really do.
This is very beautiful what you shared. Thank you so much.
Oh,
But what about your partner? How did he deal with you going back to grad school?
It didn't go well with him. I mean, it created a lot of friction in our relationship for a long time. I think that was a lot of it kind of was root problems in our relationship that hadn't been addressed because we didn't know how. I mean, this is when I didn't know anything about this stuff. And so there were layers of factors in my decision to do that. And one of those layers was, I'm going to do it no matter what you say, which is not a real healthy thing to do. I mean, I look back and I'm like, well, it worked out really well, but it was kind of like, I had some feelings of resentment. We had 6 kids and, I'm at home trying to do everything. And I didn't really appreciate the stress levels on him to maintain all of this financially and, go be work and all the stresses of that. I just would see it as like, well, he comes home tired and isn't helping me. Right. And so there was definitely some of that resentment was coming from me and my unrealistic expectations of what a human is able to do that we weren't talking about in a healthy way. So no, he did not. That did create some problems in our marriage for a while, but we've absolutely, worked through all of that and in a way that we're really able to hold each other's perspectives and understand less about the decision and more about the bigger context of that decision. And I think we both agree that it was a really good thing that I did it. Looking back, it wasn't, did the ends justify the means? I don't know. Maybe not. But it certainly helped our family to go out and find a way to get emotionally healthy and bring it back to everyone. So sometimes I think it just had to be like that for us.
And how many years was the grad school, if I may ask?
It was 2 years. Yeah, just 2 years. And then I had to do 2
It's
years.
wrong when you have many children. Yeah.
Yeah, it was long. And I did
Yeah.
hire, I mean, I made sure that we had live-in help. I mean, we had the ability to do that, thank God. And that helped a lot. So nobody was getting their like basic needs neglected, but their mom wasn't there. My littlest one was a year old, but I mean, I have to say, like, I have the most amazing relationship with her now. She's, 15, and we have.
And you're helping millions of other people,
Yeah, and I help exactly, and I learned how to help myself, and I learned how to help my family and my relationships. So what are you going to do?
It's part of life. It
is. Yeah.
Yes. Somewhere you win, somewhere you lose.
And I felt so compelled to do it. Like nothing was going to stop me. And that's kind of how I am as a person anyway. Like once I make a decision, I'm just going. But,
and I guess that is the best advice to whoever is listening, right? Find what really matters to you, because then there will be no way of not doing it. Like if it really matters to you, you will, I don't know, cross mountains. You will make it happen.
It's a beautiful way to say it, because that's how it felt to me. It was going to happen because it was the most important thing to me. Emotional health was the most important thing to me. So
great. A few closing questions, if I may.
Sure. Yep.
What belief is grounding you right now?
What belief?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. I would say my faith probably. To me there's levels of health, and one level of health is emotional health, and then there's physical health, and then my Catholic faith is very important to me. That's my spiritual health. That helps me feel grounded and tethered in the world, and it's just my way to express whatever, religion helps us express. So right, different seasons of life, I'm leaning into different things. And sometimes I'm leaning more into physical health, and sometimes I'm leaning more into emotional health. Right now, I seem to be leaning a bit more into my spiritual health. So, and I find just a lot of comfort and safety in that.
Wonderful. A lot of comments we receive is like, I wish I found some spiritual guidance to help me make sense of life. So I feel like more than ever, it's so confusing, as I said, to live in the world. And those
It
of us
is.
who have that guidance are very lucky. So,
Yeah.
what are you giving yourself permission to let go of, like to not do?
Oh, that's a good one. Right now, I am giving myself permission to not have to let my husband make more decisions without me getting in the way. Like I realized I was like, I can be very stubborn, and so sometimes if he was wanting to make a decision about something, I would just want to make the opposite decision just so I didn't feel like I didn't have a say. And so I'm really stepping back from that and being like, wait, how important is the chicken? How important is the processed chicken right now? So I'm trying to because I realized I was trying to micromanage. I have a tendency to sort of micromanage. And a lot of this stuff, I've gotten a grip on tremendously over the years. I'm not nearly as bad as I used to be, but sometimes if I start having a lot of anxiety around decision making, that tells me I need to start letting go of some things and delegating out those decisions. And right now I'm kind of leaning into that with my husband.
Especially when you're so busy. Yeah.
I know it's like I can't keep up with all the decision making, and it does require letting go. So yeah.
What's one thing you hope your children see when they watch you?
And they watch me.
Yeah, whatever you do. Yeah.
I think that if my children consistently walk away from me feeling heard, seen, understood, and cherished and valued, I will be fine. Like that, because I believe those needs are so, so, so important that if they get that consistently from us, then they will be fine in the world, like whatever they need to do. And so I don't know if that's exactly what you meant. If they see me, I would like for them to see someone who is emotionally balanced and healthy. And I guess that would be, as that person who's emotionally healthy, that what flows from that naturally is being able to engage with them in a way that helps their emotional needs be met.
Anything else you would like to share with our listeners?
No, I think you managed in a very short amount of time to hit it all, hit all the important topics. So
Great. It was a real pleasure to have you here. I am looking forward, as I said, to reading your book. I haven't yet. And I will remain your follower on Instagram.
great, perfect. All right. Well, thank you.
Great.
It's great.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I hope you enjoyed it.
And you too. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Bye.
If this episode sparked something in you, please share it with someone navigating life, love, and the mess of motherhood. And don't forget to follow us at Do Not Disturb Podcast. You can find Julie at The Mom Psychologist and her book Secure Love wherever you get yours. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time on Do Not Disturb.